everybody, I'm Amelia Robinson, the Columbus Dispatch's Opinion and Community Engagement Editor. I want to thank you for watching and tuning in to the latest in our series of town halls about issues important to this community, Columbus Conversations. This one is called How Can We Empower and Advance Women? We have a dynamic panel, all of them actually, are former Women of Achievement honorees, and the upcoming event is going to be held on April 27th. So be sure to tune into that. It's a great opportunity to see some really wonderful women in our community shine in the spotlight. As the old saying goes, we come a long way, baby, but as we all know, we have not come far enough yet. Women still only make 83 cents for every dollar paid to men on average. The situation is much worse for Black and Latin women who make 64 and 57 cents compared to non-Hispanic white male. We're going to talk about the economics behind some of this, but we're also going to talk about a number of other issues. As always, during these conversations, you are welcome to join in by submitting questions to our dynamic panelists on Facebook in the chat and also on YouTube in the chat if you're watching that way. This video will be placed on our website after the fact. If you don't see the whole thing going forward, you can go back and check it out. Now for our panelists, we have Sue Zazon, who is president of Huntington Bank Central Ohio region. We have Dr. Mashika W. Roberts, who is the health commissioner for Columbus Public Health. We have Janet Jackson, who has had 100 different jobs, including former Columbus City Attorney, Franklin County Municipal Court Judge, and President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio. We have Barb Smoot, who is President and CEO of Women for Economic Leadership and Development, WELD. And we have Sandra Anderson, who is retired attorney and a board member for Planned Parenthood. So thanks a lot for joining us, ladies. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to jump right in for questions. First questions. Like I said before, we have a lot of women who have done a lot of great things in Columbus, but obviously we're not where we want to be. There's so many hurdles facing women in this community. What's holding women back in Columbus, and what can be done to get us over these hurdles?
So I guess I'd like to start off, Amelia, and I'll piggyback on something that you kicked off the session with around pay equity and pay disparity. As a previous chair of the Columbus Women's Commission's Gender Equity in the Workplace, I am very passionate about closing the economic gaps and the health gaps that women face. If I were all powerful and I could pick just one thing to fix, it would be pay disparity. If you look at studies by Fast Company and others, just eliminating the pay gap alone would add over $500 billion to the United States GDP. It would have an immediate and favorable impacts to everything from healthcare and higher education and middle class, criminal justice, you name it. And let me just say that, even when you factor in higher education, that's no longer a solution to the issues that women face when it comes to pay equity. It's no longer the equalizer. College women disproportionately share more of the college debt. And even the more educated women become, the greater the pay disparity. And then again, if I were godmother and I can make the world happen, the second thing that I would pick is eliminate all the hoops and obstacles that women-owned businesses face when they try to get capital to invest in their businesses. They have to prove their abilities in countless ways and go through so many different training programs just to get capital infused into their business. If you look at some of the research done out there, women-owned businesses, they ask for less funding from men. They get approved at a lower rate. They pay higher interest rates. And so the stories show that we have some work yet to do.
Amelia, this is Sandy Anderson. If I could piggyback on Barb's very good comments, a little more information about the pay gap, because certainly we got a lot of work to do to bring the pay disparity to heal. There was a recent study by the Pew Research Center on gender pay gap, which had some very interesting information where we can find some clues on how to close the gap. and it focused on younger women, and for women ages 30 and under in certain metropolitan areas, not Columbus, but in certain metropolitan areas, younger women actually make as much and sometimes more than their male counterparts. These are women 30 and under, and those metropolitan areas include New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. But in Columbus, younger women ages 30 and younger have a pay gap with their counterparts of about 93 cents on the dollar. In Dayton, it's only 80 cents on the dollar. So the study analyzed why younger women are doing better in some places. And the factors that they identified were at least three. One, educational attainment. So the women who are more educated tend to make more money. So college education is still a plus. Second is transparency. That means pay audits, so we know what everybody else is making. And also there are pay equity laws that enforce pay equity. So transparency was a big factor. And then finally, awareness, because the young women are aware of their own value and they ask for what they want, and that go into a category and go into jobs that may be so-called male-dominated jobs, and they actually do better. Now, the study also showed that after age 30, the wage disparity starts growing again. And that's because a number of factors, including the mommy track, that women are penalized for being parents, passed over for promotions in greater numbers, and that disparity compounds over the years. So those obstacles and the lessons we learned from some cities where there is pay equity show us that we need to encourage and support education, lifelong education, that we need policies that promote pay equity and transparency, and that we need to encourage not just younger women, but all women to speak up and ask for what they want and negotiate and take a chance in the higher paying fields.
Amelia, this is Janet Jackson, and I don't have data. I want to go even younger than what Sandy did just now. I am gravely concerned about our young women/girls. I'm talking middle school and high school. And I know that we have great programs here in our community trying to reach those young women. But my concern is their ability to even get to the point of graduating from high school and going on to whether it's college or trade school or somehow entering into a profession. And my concerns really are around still the unacceptable rates of poverty in our community and the unacceptable rates of violence, and especially as it impacts our young women. And so as I look to the future, I would hope to see more investments put into programs and efforts to move those young, to at least ensure that they live beyond the 12th grade and have opportunities to move into education and careers.
Yeah, Amelia, this is Mashika. If I could just echo some of the comments that Janet shared, and I know Sandra is on the board of Planned Parenthood, but when we think about our young girls here in Columbus, our young girls, particularly our young girls of color, are really having some challenges. And fortunately, we had former council member Priscilla Tyson, who started the Commission on Black Girls and is now housed at Columbus Public Health. And we are working hard to make sure that our young Black and brown girls living in our community have the resources they need to be successful. We know that our Black and brown girls are more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to start a family before they might be ready or prepared to do that. And they don't have all the resources and training that they need to be able to not only care for themselves, but to care for their families. And as Janet so well said, violence is hurting our community and our young women are affected by that. So we need to instill them with a sense of confidence, a sense of hope, hope for the future, because they are our next generation. They are our future, and we need to invest in them now and not wait until they get to college age or they're professional women. We need to start investing in them now, because that is the future of women in Columbus.
Now, how do you think people, men in particular, can be allies to women and girls?
So, Amelia, this is Sue, and I think it's important to recognize, specifically in the last couple of years, that there's a big gap between men and women as far as mental health. There was a study done, and it was done, I wrote it down, women in the workforce in 2021, and there's twice the burnout rate of women right now that are in age-bearing years or have children than men, just because of all the things the pandemic have accentuated. So you think about childcare and all of those things. So from the standpoint of allies, one, it's just awareness and education that these stresses exist, and then the flexibility and foresight to be able to come up with, I think policies were mentioned before, but even just within the policies you can control at your workplace, to allow for flexibility and the empowerment of a foundation that's strong for women to be able to continue to thrive in their chosen career, whatever that might be. I think that's a big recent disparity that has come on because of just the situation we're in and circumstances of the world and the country and certainly the communities that we live in.
And so, Amelia, to add to what Sue just shared, if you look at some of the research that Lean In did, they said that more than 80% of white women and men say that they see themselves as allies to people of color at work. They actually see themselves as allies. But the research that Lean In did points to something different. They said that Black women and Latinas tend to disagree. They feel that only 25% of them felt like they were receiving support via allies. And what does a strong allyship look like from the perspective of men supporting women? It's more than the mentoring piece, it's also the sponsorship piece. This is what it looks like when women or women of color are not in the room, advocating for them, helping them get those stretch assignments, helping them get access to P&L responsibility. When the talent management discussions take place, ensure that biases are removed and left at the door. You can't be silent while certain things occur in the workplace. It's being willing to speak up and ensure that women and women of color get a fair shake based upon their accomplishments and what it is they bring to the table. It doesn't look like silence.
If I could build wonderful points, and you remind me of some lessons I would like to teach men in order to help them be better allies. And that would be to quit interrupting so much, as I just did for you, quit interrupting so much and listen more. And by interrupting, I mean, studies show, communication studies show that men interrupt women at great rates, very frequently, even at the United States Supreme Court. I mean, they did a study of 15 years of transcripts of the U.S. Supreme Court. And the more women are on the Supreme Court, the more interruptions there are. Sandra Day O'Connor, when she was first on the court, she was the only woman, and she was interrupted 35% of the time there were interruptions. Then 2 women came on the court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, along with Justice O'Connor, and they were interrupted 45% of the time. And then when there were 3, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Kagan, the interruptions were 65 to 66% of the time. And so studies show that men interrupt women way too much, and they got to learn to stop that. And we women have to learn to do interruptions ourselves. Madeleine Albright said that. We have to learn to interrupt. And then the listening piece is also part of championing, being champions for women, mentoring women, and not just telling us and mansplain, but actually to listen to what women have to say and to encourage women to have their say. I know you all have had this experience. When I was still practicing law, I was in a room with 12 people. I was the only woman, and we were negotiating a settlement. And I proposed a suggestion during the discussion. And 5 minutes later, a guy, let's call him Bob, made the same suggestion. And when Bob made the suggestion, proposed the idea, the other people in the room said, "That's brilliant, Bob. That's so great. We should do that." And in my younger years, when I wasn't so ornery and as old as I am, I would have let that go. But I spoke up and I said, "You're right. It's a brilliant idea because I just said it." So, if men would interrupt less, listen more, encourage women to enter the conversation, they would be better allies all around.
That happens to me every single day, unfortunately. Exactly what you just said. So it's like a balance between not being, seen as too assertive. And I think a lot of younger women particularly feel like they don't want to be seen as too assertive, but they don't want to be shrinking violence at the same time. How do you balance that out? Or should you even balance it out?
I think there's a time, and I look back on myself, and sometimes still, where I will think about what I think I'm going to sound like before I say something, because I want to make sure I'm heard. Now, part of that is just being very self-aware and making sure that my voice can be heard. The other part comes from probably years of just being the person in the room that wasn't necessarily heard, right? So I still have personal habits that have formed just from repetition and from things happening that I'm not even sure that I'm always aware of, that manifest itself, right? Some of it is the choice of words. I can't remember who told me this, but I do it all the time now. Instead of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then I'll go into something, I'll say, "Thank you for your patience." And then I'll go into it. So I say, "Thank you for being patient if I'm a few minutes late." Or instead of "I'm sorry," when you lead with "I'm sorry," that's kind of how I was taught. I think. I don't know why it always came out that way, but it's something that I was made aware of. And I think we all need to point things out to one another when we're in rooms as friends, and women are allies too. And using different words really matters. And I'm setting examples for other young women in the room or anybody. And to start with "I'm sorry" is a disservice to myself. And unless I am truly sorry for something, and there's a time and place for that too. Now I always start with "Thank you for your patience. I was running a few minutes late," instead of "I'm sorry, I'm late." Immediately that puts me in a position, I'm doing it to myself, right? And I think there's a lot of things we do ourselves just by the way we were brought up. And that's not good or bad. It just is. And we have to have the teachers around us. Even, I'm almost 60 and I still need teachers around me every day pointing things out so that I can become different. And I'll give one other specific example. I was with a group of men, and they had a young woman who had cried about something that happened in the office, and it made them so uncomfortable. Yet when they have somebody blow up and yell, let's say, that's a very much more acceptable outcome of an emotional outburst, right? And it's just physiological that women may cry and men may have an outburst. It's the same psychology, though. It's the same emotion of frustration or whatever it might be, but it's perceived completely different. And when we were talking about a promotion and so forth, it was, well, I don't know, she cried. And I said, that's no different than someone being upset about something and, saying, I don't like this or whatever it might be, and putting their fist up in a very productive way. Crying is a productive way of releasing emotion, right? And when you put it in those terms, you could absorb it and understand that that's okay. That's showing vulnerability. And so explaining that to people, that might be a strength, that they're comfortable crying. And it's perceived as a weakness versus a strength. Obviously, you have to be aware of your surroundings, but it's so interesting how the same type of emotion expressed in different ways can be perceived differently and also be attributed to someone's potential for climbing, the next step on the corporate ladder or whatever it might be. And when you take the time to explain it to someone in those terms, they were like, oh, I never thought of it that way. So some of it is taking the time to be thoughtful too of how the world's working. And I gave that young woman a ton of credit for being comfortable shedding a few tears and saying, you know what, I'm done with this now. I feel better and I'm ready to move on. That shows a strong, powerful woman.
That kind of brings us to a question too. A lot of women feel like they have to compete against other women. I know a lot of women in media, and I know personally, who have competed against each other because there's one in the room of this or that, and they want to be that one. How do we become better allies to each other?
I'll start on on that one. It is critically important to me personally that we show and demonstrate support, for other women. So one of the ways that I do it in my years of so-called retirement is to actually spend time with younger women. And when I say younger women, I'm usually talking about anywhere from 35 to 50 or 55, to coach, and to mentor them. And sometimes that coaching and mentoring is in fact how to handle other women in their workplaces or in the community. Because I've had that experience over, many, many years of working and being a leader, in this community. I would say from a practical perspective, and I would look back to my years both as the city attorney, and the city attorney's office is quite frankly one of the largest law firms in the city of Columbus, and at United Way, was to demonstrate it in terms of how I personally treated women who were on my staff, making sure that if I had a situation where I could see one woman not supporting another woman or other women, I quite frankly would go to that person and have a conversation with her. Many times very challenging and tough decisions, but if you're the leader of the organization, then it's your responsibility to step in and to nip that in the bud as quickly as you can.
And Amelia, Janet is right on. And when I talk about younger women, Janet, that demographic is getting bigger and bigger as I get up in years. Right? There's a lot of younger women when you and I look back. But there's a couple of things that come to mind. And one is, in answer to your question about the stereotype that strong women can't work together, that is a stereotype that needs to be mothballed. That yes. Stereotype needs to be erased. And a couple things come to mind. One, if anybody here or listening is a Ted Lasso fan, that show, one of the things I love about the Ted Lasso show is that there are two strong women who are very good friends. The female freely is just extraordinary. And it's so different from times past when in entertainment, it was high drama to have, two women competing for one guy or having them in a cat fight competing. And so it is possible. And not only possible, it happens that there's friendships and we are allies regardless. And the other thing that comes to mind is that wonderful picture of Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton in a ladies' room, with Madeleine Albright has notes in her hand and she is mentoring Hillary Clinton before Hillary Clinton goes out to give a speech about women's rights. And that is such a powerful example of two strong women working together and being not just friends, but also allies for one another. So that's a stereotype that's got to be out of there.
And Amelia, I would just add, and I agree these issues happen in the workplace, and we all, whether we're the leaders or we are mid-management, have to step in and try to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible. But I think in Columbus, we are fortunate. The reason why we're all here is because we are all members of the Academy of Women of Achievement at the YWCA. And we're fortunate here in Columbus that the YWCA is as strong as it is and as passionate as they are about women's issues, and identify women in our community every single year who have really led an extraordinary life, and we celebrate them, and we celebrate them proudly, without any competition. So I think we're fortunate to live here in Columbus and have that asset.
And so
Amen.
I know we've covered this a lot, but my day job is we help women build the confidence and learn how to collaborate with each other. Two favorite quotes of mine. I don't know who said them, but they're two of my favorite quotes. Strong women support strong women, and empowered women empower women. Truly strong women who are confident in what they bring to the table see working with other strong women as excellent opportunities to deliver results and learn new skills. And empowered women are not threatened by strong women, and they are able to discern when perceived negative behaviors are really a plea for more empowerment. I've heard comments from women who have said that coming up, no woman ever helped them in their careers. I think that's taking the short-term view. Many of us have the opportunities that we have today because we have literally stood on the shoulders of women who came before us and fought for the opportunity so that we could have better outcomes. What I love being here in the Columbus region is the spirit of collaboration between a number of women's organizations here. And let me just call one out, for example. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the Central Ohio chapter, is made up of some of the most amazing, successful, hardworking, strong Black women in this community. And collectively, they've raised scholarship funds to help young Black women attend college. They're on the leading edge of advocacy for Black women and girls. They are singularly united in being role models for girls and young women. This community is replete with examples of strong women working constructively for the greater good. I might just, toot the team, the horn of everyone who's on this call. You're all leading organizations and have led organizations where you've had many strong women, and you've learned to pull everyone together for the good, for the greater good of communities. So, you may hear a story there, but you know how that works. People shine too much of a spotlight on one outlier issue as opposed to looking at the collective whole and the longevity of strong women here working collectively.
Look at Ywca. I just totally butchered your name 100 different ways. Just mentioned you guys are all women of achievement. What does it mean to be successful, and has that changed over the years for you?
Well, I'll answer it as people are thinking. Yes, it has changed over the years for me. Success would be defined by educational attainment, awards, accolades, winning in court, and those kinds of things. But that's not really true success. Over time, I've come to understand that true success really means building and keeping your reputation. It means service to others. It means community. And so, like, building the reputation is something that's important for success, proving your integrity, proving your reliability. Reputation is something that needs to be built slowly, brick by brick. It can be ruined instantly, so be careful. And then service to others. Again, one of my heroes, I will quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg, says, if you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside yourself, something that makes life a little better for people less fortunate than you. So being of service to others, serving on nonprofit boards, volunteering, reading to people, looking after the elderly, whatever it is that you can be of service really is a definition of success. And then finally, community. Community to me means building up a solid collection of people, building up a collection of friends and family and loved ones, and even people we don't know, but we care about, and working to build that community and also serve that community. So yeah, it has changed the definition of success in my life.
I think if I had asked myself some almost 20 years ago now, a little more than that, when I graduated from med school, success would have been just what Sandra said, the degree, having attained those academic accomplishments, and getting a job. And now looking back, I define success as, obviously career accomplishments are great, but really thinking about the impact that I've left on my community or that I am making on my community, and trying to lift as I climb and lift other people up. And whether those are youth who are looking up to me like, oh, I can be that one day, or whether those are my peers that I work with who might be a few years younger than me, that I'm empowering and teaching them how they can be strong leaders in the future. So it definitely has changed as I have matured.
Now, Mashika, what would you tell your younger self if you can go back in time? You ran into her in the grocery store. You just struck up a conversation. What would you tell her?
Wow, so much I would tell her. I would say stay focused. And I would say really figure out what are your priorities and focus on your priorities. And everything else will come into play.
I think the success, the power to choose and to be intentional. So I have a quote that defines wealth. And when we think of wealth, so many times that we think of money. And the quote is this, and I have it in my office, and it says, wealth is the power to choose. Financial wealth is the power to choose how to spend money. So how to spend your money. Social wealth is the power to choose who to hang out with. Time wealth is the power to choose how to spend your day. And mental wealth is the power to choose how to spend your attention. And so all of that comes down to choice. And I can remember saying, maybe as a younger self, oh, I didn't have a choice. And I think the power to choose is always within oneself, and finding the strength, energy, focus, impact to make those good choices. And also failing a few times. But the power to choose is an incredible, like anything else, it's empowerment. And so to give other people the option to choose and lead the way is a wonderful thing.
I guess I would tell my younger self, my mother passed away earlier this month. I would tell my younger self that your mother was right 150% of the time. You should have listened to her in all those situations when she was trying to advise you. So that would be the one thing I would tell my younger self.
So Virgie just mentioned mentorship. How important is it to have a mentor? And what should a mentor-mentee relationship look like? Why should we even be talking about mentors?
I'll start on this one. I'm fortunate enough to have had several mentors in my life and career. But I met my mentor in 1977, the summer before I graduated from law school. And it was in a work situation. I was clerking in the Attorney General's office. And it has just been so important to me. So this mentor that I'm speaking of is a man. And I will just say that in terms of my career, my professional life, I have been able to discuss every single transition, question, should I do this, should I not? Back in the Attorney General's office, when I was thinking about leaving early, giving me advice as to what might help me in becoming noticed in the office and being promoted. When I was asked by someone to run, well, not to run, but to be appointed to the bench in 1987, and I was reluctant to do it. Again, he encouraged me. He laid out for me, my qualifications, and what he thought. And then I'll even move towards the last conversation. I was, quite frankly, reluctant to think about serving on the Civilian Police Review Board, and partly because at this point, in my life, and again, on the one hand, he shared his thoughts about how I deserve to be truly retired, and to be moving on and doing other things. But at the same time, he says, but Janet, when you think about the community, when you think about Columbus, this is something you should do. And so I can't speak more highly of having a mentor. And I think because of him, and others maybe, it's why I fairly freely give up my time to mentor and coach young professionals. And I would say and especially for African Americans, I would encourage those of us who have had the experiences, the life experiences, the career experiences, to make the time to share those experiences with someone. I was just maybe multitasking just a little bit, and I was communicating with a young woman, and this isn't so much about career. She's a community activist in Columbus. We don't always see eye to eye, but I know that recently in her life, violence has come into her community, and I'm sorry, it's come into her life, and I've just been very concerned about her. So I was just saying, you need to come see me. You need to come here. We need to talk. And I just wish that there were more of my peers, men and women, who would take the time to become true mentors to our younger professionals.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I will just say that I had a lot of people along the way who have been there for me and provided advice. I haven't had the classic mentee mentor relationship that Janet so well describes, but I will say, particularly since I've been to Columbus, I've had the opportunity to participate in some leadership programs, and through those opportunities, I've had a chance to establish relationships with some individuals who were a little further along in their career than I was, and who actually knew the community better than I did. And one of them is Janet Jackson, and I very much remember a conversation with Janet several years ago. And Janet will probably get a laugh out of this. I remember her telling us that she woke up at like 5 in the morning because that was her quiet time, and she could read the paper, have some coffee, and also get some exercise in before she went to work. And I thought, who would get up at 5 in the morning and do that? Like, come on. And I will tell you, probably about 5 years ago, I started getting up at 5 in the morning to exercise, to check the news, and, figure out what my day was and just have some time for me. And I tell people all the time, no one's going to bother me between 5 and 7 in the morning. So that's my time. So, I remember the nuggets of information that I hear from individuals who've been there before me. It's very helpful.
I recently had a conversation with a woman at work, and I find myself, my natural style is to be a grassroots leader. And I think it's just because of the way, as I've progressed in my career, it was kind of promoted from within, versus taking different jobs, different places to kind of advance my career. And this woman, her name's Sandy, said to me, she said, Sue, sometimes it's great to be in the orchestra, and other times you got to be the conductor, and it's time to conduct, and to have people that are honest with you when at all different parts of your life, and that give you the lift up that you need. No matter how far along we all in our careers or what we're doing, there are moments where we again default to our natural tendencies, and we need those around us to to help us. And this happened to be a female, and it was the boost I needed to say, okay, I'm in charge. Let's go. This is what we're going to do. And it was the time to do that. And I would have gotten there myself. It just wouldn't have been as quick, right? And so I think whatever your natural tendency is a beautiful thing, but those around you can help you just accelerate what you're really good at if you allow people to give you feedback. And I just thought that was really kind. And at first I was like, ouch. And then I'm like, you're right. So I think those are just really important people to have in your life. And some of it's our own responsibility to be open so that people give you the feedback that you need.
I think nobody on this list of achievement over the years, no one would be where we are without the mentor relationships that we've had. Like Janet, I can think back to, John Elam at the Voorhees firm where I started was a very important transformational mentor for me. Connie Schultz writes about how women should carry as we climb, meaning that we should bring others along with us, and especially younger women and other women along with us. And so when we have an opportunity to build a mentor relationships, we shouldn't resist. We should be flattered if someone wants to build a mentor relationship with us. I've thought over the years that official mentoring programs don't work as well as the more organic relationships. It's almost like dating or finding the right hairdresser. Some of the mentor relationships will endure. Some of them will come and go as you need people. But I would encourage younger women in particular to seek out advice, not just wait passively, but to find
What's the best way to start
somebody
those
like to have
relationships?
because they'll be flattered. Really, they'll be flattered if you ask.
So Amelia, to answer your question about the best way, one of the things that we encourage younger women to do earlier on in their careers is to establish their own personal board of advisors or their kitchen cabinet. And there's a process by which that they can do that, where they can be thoughtful. Number one, establish a clear purpose at the outset of what you want a personal board of advisors for or a mentor for. Determine the degree of structure and formality that you want to have in the relationship. Outline the rules of engagement so that all parties understand the purpose and how people will engage with each other. And be strategic in the selection of people. Don't just pick people who are going to sing your praises and be your cheerleader and talk about how good you are. As many of the women shared in this call today, it's, get some people in there who are going to tell you the truth and grab you by the back of your collar and say, wait a minute, you need to rethink how you've been showing up in the community these days. Outline the rules of engagement, be strategic in the selection of people, and know how and when in advance how you evaluate its effectiveness, change it up, disband it, add more individuals to it, whatever, but be thoughtful and have that plan in place. And, don't be afraid to ask people, and also don't take it personally if people say, no, I'm my time won't allow me to give you what you need in fairness to you. And here's some other names I'd like to introduce you to, right? So it's a process. If you're thoughtful, that does help. But to Sandy's point, it's the organic relationships I find that are more productive and feel like shoes that belong on your feet.
If I could add one other point, because I don't think I heard it in Barb's comments, which were excellent. I employ what I call the Vegas rule. Your mentee needs to know that the conversations that you have are absolutely confidential. I mentor individuals who have recently become heads of organizations, typically nonprofits. So whether the title is CEO or executive director. And I share with them that when I became the CEO of United Way, the first 6 months of that time period in my life were the loneliest professionally that I'd ever had. That there were just questions and issues where I needed someone to talk to, and I didn't have anyone. It couldn't be the members of my board. It couldn't be the heads of other nonprofit agencies, because United Way was kind of the grandmother of them all. And I actually went to Brian Gallagher, who was my predecessor, to help me find someone in the United Way system that I could have those very, very confidential conversations with, and knowing that they wouldn't be kind of heard out in the community.
So obviously the pandemic affected women to a greater extent than it had, it did men, because women are the nurturers and the child care providers and all that sort of thing. What are the lessons you think we've learned from the pandemic that can carry us forward as a community? Mashika, you got any ideas?
Well, I mean, I think we learned a lot, probably way too many to even discuss this evening. Um, I think the first thing we learned is that we don't have the appropriate safety nets in our country and in our community, particularly for those low income, those frontline workers. When we shut things down, many businesses had to close and didn't have the backup or safety net to lean on, unlike other countries that continued to give checks and make sure people had food. We didn't have that. And we know that who got hurt the most were women. Women, many times, I know some who quit their jobs because they had to stay home to be with the kids. And sometimes they were the only breadwinner in the home. And so that was a problem. We know that that also affected their ability to provide food and housing and all the luxuries that many of us take for granted every single day. But also, what we learn too is about how we value our health versus others, and how we treat other people. And that was a lesson that we learned. I, I I saw firsthand how selfish some individuals were, how they just weren't willing to do what I thought were very simple things to keep everyone healthy, and they did not want to do that. Um, but I think we have uncovered so much during this pandemic. It's sometimes challenging just to unpack it all and think about where do we start. But we have a problem in our country, and it's not just here in Columbus, of how we prioritize people and how we prioritize things. And if we look at other countries, like New Zealand and others who did it, what I would say, much better than we did, whether it was right or wrong, I wouldn't say, but they came out much better than we did.
Well, certainly the pandemic has underscored a big hole in the safety net we have all across the country, including here in Columbus, the lack of affordable childcare. So the women that have left the workforce is because they bear the brunt of what to do when the schools close and the daycares close. Who's going to take care of the kids? So we've had a major, significant dropout of the workforce, from the workforce, by women. There's a wonderful opinion piece today by my friend Janetta King, and also written by Shannon Jones. Investment in childcare is key to economic growth. And their argument is not just that childcare is needed to help the individual mother who should go back to the workforce or needs to go back to the workforce, but it's key to our economic growth. I mean, women make up a good number of jobs in small businesses. And so small businesses are hurting because of the workforce pool. So this pandemic has laid bare that big hole in the safety net of not having enough access to affordable childcare.
There's one other point too that's been deeply concerning and unfortunately not surprising to see reports of domestic violence increase over the past few years. And I think we can all understand the role of COVID in all of this. This has not been just Columbus, this has been true nationally. If you look at statistics, it impacts all genders, not just women and not just young women. It impacts across the board. And resources were constrained even before COVID hit. And now certainly they're even under more stress. So it's also shining a spotlight on additional resources needed to address domestic violence.
Great. So we're coming up on the end of the program. We've run out of time. It's been a fast hour, and I really appreciate all you guys' insights. I'm hoping that it helps some folks out there. One thing I really wanted to get to, though, is the idea that we are women who support other women. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about women that you know who are leaders in the community that people may not know about, who deserve a little bit of praise and a little bit of recognition. You know any good women you ever heard of?
Let me start by saying pay attention to any of the YWCA's Women on the Rise. This year and in years past, the YWCA does a great job of finding and recognizing and encouraging younger women in the community. So that's one place to look. And I've got some heroes among the young leaders in Columbus. Megan Kilgore, the city auditor, Elizabeth Brown, city council president, Erica Crowley, the Franklin County newest Franklin County commissioner, and I'll give a shout out to Emily Quick Shriver, who is the executive director of the Matriots, which is a political action committee whose mission is to put more women in public office, because when there's more women at the table, women and families will thrive and prosper. So a number of people come to my mind, and as I said, Janet, most women are younger than us these days, so that's a big pool.
That is true. I'm going to name 4, and I just have the privilege of being with them on a regular basis. Dawn Tyler Lee, who has served this community, but just about a year ago made the decision to step out and become, an entrepreneur. Janika Pierce Tucker, who worked for me when I was in the city attorney's office, and she's going to be honored this year as a woman of achievement. And truly is, as I say to folks about Janika, she's the only other person other than my son who sends me a Mother's Day card every year. Tony Cunningham, who brought Perscolas to Columbus and is now with Unite Us and is doing incredible work. And then my last daughter that I put in this group is Tasha Booker Fowler, who, after leaving United Way, worked for a number of organizations and went with City Year. And I could name others. I mean, so many others. But I am so impressed. And these are all younger women of color. And I have the honor of being referred to as Mama J by most of them. But there's so many others that I have a chance, to touch and be involved with. I have hope for the future in Columbus, and I have hope for future female leaders when I look at the young women that I have the honor of being personally involved with.
And I echo every name that Janet mentioned. I would add 3 more to that list, one of which is a Women of Achievement this year, and that's Dr. Laura Espibel. Dr. Espibel is an ER doctor. with the Ohio health system, where she has a leadership role there. And so, being an ER doctor, you don't necessarily hear from her or see her often, but if you ever are in need for emergency room care, you want someone who's compassionate, smart, and knowledgeable. And Dr. Espibel is all of that. In addition to that, she has started a program here to increase the pool of minority kids who are interested in medicine. It's called Made for Medicine, and it's in partnership with the Columbus Medical Association. And I'm so proud of her. She's already brought 2 cohorts through that program and is looking at more. But she realizes, like many of us, that there's a shortage of minority physicians out there, and they're needed. And we've got to start early to get them interested in medicine so they can graduate from high school, go on to college, and then go on to medical school. Added to that list, I would also put Dr. Olivia Nathan. She is a pharmacist at Equitas. And I would add to that Autumn Glover, who now works for Ohio Health and does a lot of community outreach there. So as you can see, my list includes a lot of healthcare people because that's where my professional interests are. But these are great women, and will be phenomenal leaders in our community.
I'll add on 3 that I think, and mine are going to be in affordable housing and housing, because I am involved with a lot of that at Huntington at the bank. And both of them rose through the ranks, which I think is wonderful and can be challenging, but it's a huge opportunity. The first is Leah Evans from Homeport. She'd been with Homeport for a very, very long time. And when her predecessor retired, and they were doing the search, they ended up looking internally, which I think is wonderful. The second would be Lark Mallory, Affordable Housing Trust. She also rose from within the ranks of Affordable Housing Trust, which I think is exceptional. And lastly, as an honoree this year, Joanna Pinkerton from CODA. And she is just a brilliant, brilliant mind. And just putting a plug in for her, that she shows up as she is. And I love the fact that she can carry, the little rhinestone in her nose and carry on a scientific conversation all at the same time. And you just watch her in awe because she comes as she is. And those 3 women are just magic makers, if you ask me.
So I like to ditto all that everyone said. I'm blessed to have a job that every year we pick 12 women to recognize as women welding the way. It is so hard to just narrow it to a few, but let me just continue the affordable housing segment that Sue had started. Danielle Willis, who is SVP over at National Church Residences, and she has on her team LaChandra Baker, who goes by Law. I'd also like to give a shout out to Lily Kavanaugh, who is the Executive Director for the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission. Dr. Kim Carter, who's over at Ohio Health, and she also is the CEO of the Igniter. Katie and Comer, CEO of the Promise Box. And we are going to run out of time before all of us can really shout out all the names of the amazing women that we have in this community. And one thing that is for darn sure, Columbus has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to extraordinary women doing extraordinary things to make this place a great place to live and work for all of us.
And that is definitely the truth. And I want to thank you ladies for being part of this show and for everybody for watching it. You can support local journalism like this by subscribing to The Dispatch at dispatch.com/subscribe. We're going to keep the conversation going. There's a number of ways of doing that. We have a new newsletter, the Conversation newsletter. You can find more about that on dispatch.com. We also have a Facebook group called Columbus Dispatch Conversation. Watch for my new podcast, Then What Happened, which is going to launch next week, wherever you find your favorite shows. Want to thank my colleagues Chandler and Joe, who no one can see, but they do the whole work that puts this whole program together. Would also give a special shout out to Jessica, who helped organize the event from the YWCA. Please watch for their event, Women of Achievement, which will be held virtually on April 27th. But most of all, I want to thank our panelists, Sue Cezanne, who is president of Huntington Bank, Central Ohio region, Dr. Ywca, I'm sorry, once again, I butchered your name, Roberts, who is the health commissioner of Columbus Public Health. We have Janet Jackson, who is a former city attorney and Franklin County Municipal Court judge. Barbara Smoot, who is president of and CEO of Women for Economic and Leadership Development. And last but not least, Sandra Anderson, who is a retired attorney who is on the board of trustees for Planned Parenthood. So thanks a lot, and I really do appreciate you guys talking to us. Please feel free to reach out to the Dispatch if you have ideas for upcoming shows. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Amelia, and thanks to the YWCA. Thank you.
Sure.
Bye-bye, all.